things don't always turn out the way you planned. Often, life invades your reality, and you discover that circumstances come up and challenges, death of a loved one, friends, relatives, monetary challenges, politics, religion. Lots of things come into our lives that affect us dramatically and cause us to adapt to them in some way. And how you adapt to them really is up to you. Some people live their whole life carrying baggage that they don't need to carry. Some people go along with scars that probably could have been healed. Some people live with the reality of their life existence being such that they have things that cause them pain or suffering that they really don't need to have. They could change themselves or change their way of approaching life and be dealing with the reality that living life is a matter of process of adapting and changing with the times and the seasons that we go through. You know as well as I do that during summer, of course, you would wear less clothes and you would adapt to the bright sunshine, or you would go inside the shade from the 100-degree weather. And in the winter, you would put on more clothes. You would adapt to the circumstances of your life. And a lot of times people forget that along the way. They run into situations or circumstances that they really aren't prepared for. They didn't think that things would turn out the way they did. Well, Jesus had a way of saying it that was pretty blunt and pretty simple that a lot of times people seem to forget. It's just basic math in a way, or you could say basic common sense. You reap what you sow, bottom line. Your life is an accumulation of the things you have done in your life. And often, the things that come back upon your life are the things that you planted in the soil of your life's experiences. Sometimes those are good. Sometimes you have helped someone along the way, and then at some other point in time, you were helped. You see, God said it in a way that maybe sounds a little spiritual, but he means it that way. Grace for grace. And what that means is simply that help someone, you'll be helped. Forgive someone, you'll be forgiven. Love someone, and you'll be loved. But you have to also be real about those circumstances of life that maybe weren't so good, that maybe you caused some of the things that happened in your life. You know, hated someone, so you were hated. Mistreated someone, so you were mistreated. Unjustly judged someone, so you were judged. Because Jesus said, judge not, for what measure you judge, you shall be judged. So God sent his Son to explain to some things about our life and living that he, as creator, was trying to tell us that, look, I know what goes on. This is how life is living. This is what happens in life. You reap what you sow. You get what you put into it. You will have the action, as we say in physics, and the reaction. For everything there's an equal opposite reaction, is what the law of physics says. Now, there can be a certain amount of adjustment to that, but only God can make those adjustments, because he lives outside this dimension that we call reality of life, and he can do things that we can't do for ourselves. He can forgive, he can change, he can take that which was crooked and make straight. He can take that which is straight and make crooked. He can have mercy on whom he will have mercy. Being that he's a God of love, he constantly is giving us his word and his emotion to show us the reality of life if we would just get with the program, if we would adapt to the situation, if we would recognize the circumstances of how he is arranging life. Because even though we reap what we sow, even though we suffer the consequences of our own actions, even though we could sow to the Spirit and reap of the Spirit, sow to the flesh and reap of the flesh, we could forgive and be forgiven, we could love and be loved, and those positive things that God had said would come to us, we can also be given grace and mercy for those times when we didn't do the right thing, when we did the wrong thing, and suddenly we find ourselves caught up in the consequences of our own actions. When we find ourselves trapped within the box that we created for ourselves, that we can't find hope, and we feel hopeless and despair because we've done it to ourselves and we know it. We know the reality of what we've done, and it's caused us to be separated, as it were, from God. But you see, we have someone who's on our side. We have someone who's working with us, who is constantly talking to God on our behalf. We're told that Jesus, after he died on the cross, rose again, but then he didn't leave it there. He not only rose again, he went into hell for 3 days and 3 nights and preached liberty to those that were held captive there. He preached the gospel to those who were looking forward to his coming. And then, even more than that, he came back to his disciples to prove that there was more to life than death. There was more to existence than simply the reality of, oops, you blew it, that's it, it's over. As a matter of fact, he came back and ate with them and drank with them and proved that there was an eternal life to come. And once he proved that to his disciples, once he consoled them and comforted them and gave them his commission, then he went to heaven. But he didn't leave it there. It says that he intercedes day and night. He is constantly talking to his Father on our behalf, on yours and mine. You see, I don't know about you, but me, I need someone like that, because every day, I blow it. And God knows that. There's no doubt about it. As a matter of fact, I use that expression regularly in these videos that, given 5 minutes alone, and I'll go out and sin. So it needs to be that God controls and rules my reins and heart and mind, lest I take over the control of my own life and find myself in sin, because that's where I'll dive in regularly if I'm given the opportunity to. But you see, I also have the opportunity to turn my life over to God and let him direct me as he chooses. For the direction of a man's heart is his own, but the footsteps are ordered of the Lord. And God can take me from despair into hope. He can take me from a hopeless situation and circumstance and bring light into it and cause me to fall into his mercy and discover grace in my time of need. Now, I love having a God like that, who knows my frame, who knows how I'm built, who knows what I'm made out of, that I'm but dust and flesh, and that I need his guidance. I need his help. I need him to live in me, sinner that I am. And so, because I know that, I choose to operate in a different mindset. I choose to walk in a way that's different than most would say to do and to be. I choose to be a born-again Christian. I choose to be born of the Spirit. I choose to be a Christian. I choose to ask God on a daily basis to help me, because I can't help myself. And in that helplessness, I find myself in the favor of God. For God doesn't need, and God doesn't meet those who are self-sufficient, but rather he looks for those who are God-dependent to accomplish his will. Because when we think we know anything at all, he says we know nothing at all. When we act as though our lives are perfect and put together, little do we know that we're about to fall. God says, I am the Lord your God. Walk before me and be humbled. Because all glory and honor and praise, all realization of the reality of our existence comes from this simple statement. We are created for his good pleasure and not our own. And the 99%, or the 100%, if you want to call it that, of creation as it exists today really is about doing our own thing. We choose to go our own way. We choose to satisfy ourselves rather than satisfy or to glorify God with our lives. What would you do today if you knew that you were a sinner? What would you do today if you knew that you needed grace in time of need? What would you do today if you recognized that you can't do it on your own? That the reality of everything that you've ever tried comes back to haunt you and beat you up. What would you do if you suddenly discovered that not only do you reap what you sow, but you don't like what you've been sowing? You don't want to do it anymore. You don't want to suffer the consequences of your actions anymore. You want something more to life than just suffering the consequences of what you have done or what the world has done to you. You want more than what you got. We call that salvation for a reason, because it's saving you from yourself. First, it's saving you from the world, which you can look around and see that most of the time, most people don't know what they're doing. You can see the inequalities and the reality of how unfair life is. Oh, sure, we're told that we're created by our Creator with certain inalienable rights, those among them being life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But how real is that statement? It's a high idea, but it's not the reality of God. God never said it, so God doesn't do it. What God says, He provides for it in the Scripture. He provides that every man is equal in one way, and only one way. We all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. Every man and woman and child, every creature in creation that's born under the sun, until there is a new heaven and a new earth, is under corruption and thus born in sin. Born in sin, conceived in sin, and dies in sin. At least the flesh. But if we're born again, then we become a new creation. We become something different. We are changed. We are morphed. We are metamorphosized into something more than what we started off as. We are changed as though we were the caterpillar crawling around in this earth, experiencing only one set of circumstances, which was to eat and feed ourselves, which was to crawl on plants and to consume everything in sight, to eat here and keep going and to move along until finally we form that crystallisis where we move inside the cocoon of God's will, and then we wait as God works on us and changes us from that crawling caterpillar that consumes everything in sight to one day being a butterfly who rests in the glory of the love of God, is shining in His face and grace, that the light shining upon a butterfly causes its wings to flap, and it sits in the sunlight enjoying God's favor. That's what we're called to do if we are going to experience His salvation. Because salvation isn't something you have to have. You can go to hell, quite frankly. You can go to a place that God never intended you to be. You can go to a reality that God didn't want for you in the beginning. He created a place that we call hell, and the lake of fire, specifically for angels and beings that were in His domain, that were in a place where He's at, that had rebelled against Him, for a reason that only He knows, that we don't understand completely, but we try to. We try to add our own perspective. But you see, the difference being is that when you know you're not in control, you don't try to find out everything there is about who is in control. You accept that God is God, and you are not. And when you realize that, then you want something He's got that you don't have. And that something is what we call salvation. That means that you would spend an eternity forever and ever and ever in an ages to ages non-ending life, constantly experiencing something new that God said He intended for us as being created in His image. That if we want to fulfill our destiny, then we will discover salvation. We will find God's provision for our suffering the consequences of our own actions. We will uncover the reality of what life is all about in this world, because we know that the soul will be eternal and returns to God from which it was created. We know that there must be something more to this existence than just simply eating and consuming everything in our sight. That we were created for something greater than what we are. And that greatness comes through Jesus Christ dying for our reality to be accepted in God's sight, so that we could come to a place of knowing Him in a personal and intimate way. And that's why it's called salvation. Because it's being saved from a destiny that caterpillar should it find itself terminated, would still die as a caterpillar. But a butterfly that dies as a butterfly is a butterfly. Do you see the difference? You could die as a sinner and die in your sin, and when you do, you'll be cast into the lake of fire because you won't permanently be gone. If anything, your soul will return to God from which it came. But did you create and allow God's recreation of being born again? Did you become likened unto the Son of God that God intended you to be from the very beginning? Or did you just stay as a caterpillar, consuming everything inside? When you die, you must find yourself in the Son of God. That's what God said salvation is. He who has the Son has life. He who has not the Son of God has not life. And Jesus said, this is life eternal, that they should know me and know him who sent me. Do you know who Jesus is? Have you talked to him and asked him about this thing called salvation? Have you discovered you have a Father in heaven? Have you found out that there's more to Christianity than the religious thing? There's something called relationship that you can experience intimately and personally, irregardless of the church or what churches you think you should go to or have gone to. You can have a personal relationship with God as intimate and as choice-driven as you would have it to be, should you call upon the name of the Lord to be saved. That's really what it's all about. Because anyone and everyone can talk a good story, live a good life, and act like they've had it all. But when you die, when you finally come to that place of death, and you close your eyes and open them again, where will you be? That's the bottom line. And that's why so many different ways and so many different opportunities salvation is presented to you, to understand the choice is yours to make. God has called you to salvation. God has called you to more of an existence beyond this life than what you've ever dreamed of before or ever imagined through any kind of religious literature you've ever read or ever heard of. God is wanting and desiring that you should know him in a personal and intimate way so that you would have life eternal. As Jesus said, that's what it is, knowing him. But the choice to know him is yours. The choice to comprehend God is yours. If any man lack wisdom, let him ask of God, who upbraideth not, but giveth to all men liberally. And God said he would give it to you. He said that if you would trust him with all your heart, leaning not in your own understanding, in all your ways acknowledging him, he would direct your path. God can lead you, God can speak to you, and God can direct you. God can reveal everything you really wanted to know, or get you to the place where you really don't care anymore because you know you're loved. You know that the consequences of your life are not going to be paid by you, but that you have reaped God's consequences because he gave his life for you. Are you willing to give your life to him so that you can not suffer the consequences of your own life, but take unto yourself the ramifications of his life being given for you? You have that chance. The choice is yours to make. The opportunities of salvation are there for you as long as you make those choices before you die. We're told today, if you hear his voice, harden not your heart, but that's your choice. You know, if you feel something and understand something or know something, you know, go do what you need to do. Go talk to God, or don't. Go be real about your life, or just go on with life and see if you don't suffer the consequences of your choice. Even today, of hearing his voice, of feeling him talking to you today. Because it is said that today, if you hear his voice, harden not your heart, because it will get harder the more you ignore so great a salvation has been provided for you. So choose, even today. Choose you this day whom you will serve, whether your own understanding or God's understanding. Whether you seek to take upon yourself the mantle of your responsibility and say, yes, I own my life. This is my life. I'll live it the way I want to. And you will. You get to. That's the freedom you have. You can do it your way. And at the end of your life, you'll pay. But also at the end of your life, you could be given grace and mercy. So it's your choice. Once again, you get to make that opportunity to choose this day whom you will serve, whether yourself or God. The consequences of your choice are your own.